Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Tom Wells here. Today is Friday. Happy Friday, March 23rd, 2018, 8 a.m. Eastern Time. Your first daily dose of happy for the day. And it's been a happy week for me. I've had a successful week in terms of manifesting stuff. Because not only did I have all the success with influencing the weather here in Connecticut to avoid the effects of that nor'easter that flew through, which I'm still kind of crowing about. But also on Tuesday, I think it was, Tuesday or Wednesday, I announced that I had gotten rid of all the negative self-talk with the mirror work. And it's been weird, Tom. I was telling you before the show, it's been weird, the feeling of, you're alive, but all that negative self-talk you're so used to hearing is gone. It's just silent. And it's almost spooky, like, where did it go?
Wow. That's really good.
It is good, yeah.
Quite an accomplishment.
I'm still getting used to it. And I also noticed last night, Louise had something on TV. I can't even remember what it was, but it had some fairly negative themes in it. And I watched it with her for a little bit, and I could just feel how it was all trying to come back. I could feel the impact of that stuff on my mind, and it was not comfortable. It was not a happy thing. So it was just like a further reminder, I think, that when we watch and listen to all that junk, it just really affects us. And
so did you walk away from the television?
I did. Yeah, I just reached a point where I said, I just can't do this, and walked away and went to the other room, and I don't remember what I did. I just wanted to get away,
Yeah, that's what I do almost every time the news comes on. I used to love to listen to National Public Radio for years and years and years. And now, and if I always kind of knew that they were just way overdoing talking about the problems, and just, of course, they analyze problems. They go deep into the analysis of the problem. And they bring all the experts on to talk about the analyzation of the problem. And it would used to wear me out anyway, but I would listen to it because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be informed about what's going on. And it was, NPR was supposed to be the coolest thing in the world back in the day. But then, when it comes on, like in between listening to music, and a little bit of it comes on in the car on the radio, I just listen for a few seconds, and as soon as it gets to that feeling of this doesn't feel good, I just shut it off.
Yeah,
because I don't really care what they're talking about if it doesn't feel good. But if it does feel good, I've listened to whole shows, sometimes like Science Friday or something, if they're talking about something that feels good. But even then, if you listen closely, so much of the mainstream media has got there's like a what's the word? Oppositional messages, like there's struggle going on, and they're talking about the struggle, that people deal with. And of course, that's what we're going to be talking about today in our podcast. But
you alluded to it when you said they bring in the experts to talk about and analyze what happened. And to me, for me, the breaking point is when they bring in the experts to analyze the other experts who are analyzing the problem. At that point, that's where you're in the oppositional research thing. And at that point, I'm saying, guys, haven't you beaten this dog to death yet?
Yeah, it's odd. It really is odd that the news is so much that way. It's just this constant regurgitating or replaying of every little nuance of the negative aspect of something. It seems like, and occasionally they're working towards solutions. They're working towards positive things, and they're certainly launching rockets of desire for something better, but it gets to me to be pretty tiring and wears me out.
Oh, yeah.
I want to be inspired, and that's what our show's about today.
Yeah.
Where did this title between inspiration and being motivated to do something?
Where did this title come from? Because I thought that was an interesting title.
Well, actually, Abraham talks about it a lot, so it's very much a common theme that they bring up, and a lot of people get in the chair when they're asking questions of Abraham, and they'll ask this pretty clearly, and for me, it's a constant in my life. I mean, this has been a constant ever since college, where I'm asking myself, what is, like when I was in college, that's what I was asking myself after I got done with my basic curriculum I had to get done. What do they call that? Your core curriculum,
Right.
I then was looking at the options of electives that I could take, and and I started to realize that I had finally, for the first time in my life, in a way, the difference between motivation and inspiration. That now I wasn't motivated by the fact if you don't do this, you'll never graduate. I was motivated by what do I want to do? And I was so demotivated by the majors that were in the college catalog that I said, none of these things inspires me. I don't want to be a businessman. I don't want to be a psychologist. I don't want to be an engineer. I don't even want to be an actor. I want to be something that's unique to me that feels really good. Just that feels really good. What is it I would really love to do? And so I started taking all those classes, science fiction, Celtic mythology, Indian mythology, a class called Understanding Love, a class called Creativity. And I took acting classes, improvisation. I just started taking all these things that felt good to me. And ever since then, my whole life has been, does it feel good? Does the thing that I'm doing feel good? And if not, I really don't want to do it. And luckily, the job I created was only 100 days a year because I had to motivate myself to do that job, even though there was good feeling parts of it, luckily.
Good.
But largely, those 100 days a year that I worked I had to motivate myself. And luckily, I made really good money every day, so I could live really well on 100 days a year. But it was motivation. And then the rest of the time that I wasn't working, I was trying to do things that inspired me. But it was so ingrained in me as a kid to do things from motivation rather than inspiration that I'm still to this day dealing with it every day. Like, what is it to be inspired today to do the things that I want to do? Or am I feeling motivated by the things I need to do and I better do them or else there's going to be consequences to pay?
So is that the difference for you between inspiration and motivation? I'm wondering how do you measure what's inspiring you?
Yeah, well, I measure it by how I feel. And when I look at, I slowly quit making a list of things to do based on, if you don't do these things, there's going to be consequences to pay. And I started to say, because Abraham said, put at the top of your list of things to do, my dominant intention today is to feel good, or my one thing on my list of things to do is to feel good. And so I literally started making lists where I would put, a great big number 1 and a great big letters, I'd put feel good. And then I would list, and I get these small pieces of paper where I couldn't put too many things on them. And I would write like 5 or 6 things, other things I was going to get done that day. But the main thing was to feel good. And for a while, because I had some money in savings, I was able to just focus on the feeling good. Even if I didn't get the other 5 or 6 things done, generally I'd be okay, And so I've learned now after years of doing that I make a list and I hold it really lightly, okay, I want to clean out the garage and I do have to start looking for a new condo. And I do want to, call so-and-so and I do want to check out this new way of marketing my coaching business, but I don't put an emphasis on them like a do or die. Like if I don't do these things, I'm going to end up in poverty. Or if I don't do these things, I won't be ready to move out of my condo on time. But the reality is I'm still pretty motivated by that way of thinking. It's like I use the word motivated. That's interesting. Instead of I'm really inspired by doing it in a different way. So I'm learning constantly, and I'm getting really good at only choosing the things that make me feel, literally, I feel better when I do that thing. That's what every day I try to pick the ones that I say, which ones do I feel good doing today?
Okay.
Because sometimes cleaning out the garage, is a good feeling. I get rid of stuff. I put it in my car. I take it to Goodwill. I take stuff and recycle it, and I feel good. I sell things on Craigslist. It feels good. But if it feels like it's a chore and I'm up against a time deadline and if I don't get this done, I'm going to have to take this stuff with me to my next place, and what a hassle that's going to be. Instead of that way of thinking, I just say, how can I do this in an inspired way where I stay in my vortex? Because that's the difference. When you're inspired, you're in your vortex of good feeling. When you're motivated, you're outside the vortex. And Abraham said in motivation, you're really asking. You're asking the universe instead of doing it because it feels good and you're allowing in what feels good, what feels good, what feels good.
So you're kind of going with the idea that emotions are communications from our inner being, and that if they feel good, that's a message. That's a message to you.
Yeah, yeah. And Abraham said that's the biggest thing happening in our lives, is that we've cut off our belief that following what feels good is the way to live. Because when we were raised, we got so many messages from, they say especially your mother, but from both parents and teachers and peers, and they said even lovers have give us messages that if you don't do this for me, like mother, when she frowns at us, we know don't do it. When she smiles at us, we know do it. And so we learn to respond to these cues from our environment, that we do it out of a feeling of obligation. We do it out of a feeling of, if, do or die. We do it out of all the wrong reasons, you might say, that don't really turn us on. But if we were taught from the time we were really little, do it, honey, because it feels good. Do it because you want to do it. Do it because it makes you happy. And if our lives were kind of set up that way from the beginning, then Abraham said, we'd have a completely different society. It would be a paradigm shift. If everybody was following what felt good to them, there's an amazing paragraph I found about it. I can read it an hour later, but I don't want to just talk and talk and talk.
Well, no, that's all right, because, in fact, I'm curious to hear what they have to say, because I've often thought the same thing. In fact, I've even voiced that opinion here on the show, that if we had this kind of large scale, and by large scale I mean more than a dozen people, hundreds, maybe thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people shifting the way that they choose to live their lives by, like you say, choosing to live by what they're inspired to do, and what they're based on, making their decisions based on how they feel about what it is they're going to do, and so forth, that we would have a dramatically different, and I would say a dramatically better society. So I'm encouraged to hear that Abraham said the same thing. I'm curious to say, what is it that they said exactly? Well, how do they spell it out?
The mind-blowing quote that I put in italics when I heard it last night, because they're talking about following your emotional guidance system, because that's the only thing that can ever bring you happiness. So if your emotion is telling you it doesn't feel good, you move away from the thing that doesn't feel good, and you move toward the thing that does feel good, and you get better and better at that. And eventually, you could say you're following your bliss. You're literally doing the thing that Joseph Campbell's, the great archaeologist, anthropologist who studied human nature for so many years, and he said the key to your entire life, coming from all the scriptures and all the mythology of the world, is follow your bliss. And if you follow your bliss, your life will work out the way you want it to work out. So here's what Abraham said. Ultimately, this is the ultimate absolute truth of all of this. If every person that you knew were in the vortex, in that place of allowing what they really want to come forth, so following inspiration, there would never be anyone who ever harmed anyone. There would never be anyone who ever insulted anyone. In other words, you would have a paradigm shift. You would move to another plateau of life. There would still be contrast. You would still have expansion, but there wouldn't be the brutality or the inhumanity that so many people who are doing so much of their behaving or acting out are doing from outside the vortex. So because of this huge thing in our society, to do things because you better do it or else there'll be bad consequences, people acting from that place are the main reason we have so much brutality and inhumanity to each other, and people insulting each other or harming each other, because they're driven by this demand to do it or else, and they're not following their happiness, their joy.
It makes a lot of sense to me. There's a part of me that says, well, I want it to be that way. So is it just me engaging in wishful thinking again? But there's also the part of me that says, if I put myself into the place of somebody who deliberately wants to engage in some sort of violent or violating behavior against another person or against other people. If I really want that, can I want that in a way that is in the highest place? I mean, Wendy has actually proposed that idea. It was sort of a mental exercise more than anything else. But she proposed, well, isn't it possible that somebody could, just genuinely want that and genuinely feel joy and upliftment and, get in their highest vibrational point by wanting to do that?
They're wanting to treat other people badly?
Yeah. By wanting to engage in what others of us would call very undesirable behaviors. And I didn't have a quick answer for her, so I just kind of went, and went along with it. But there was that little piece of me that wondered, is that possible? And what Abraham is suggesting there is, no, that's not really possible. Abraham doesn't actually say that, but they certainly strongly suggest it.
They do say one thing, and I had a client ask me, in fact, it was a discussion recently as to whether or not, writing about relationships that have gone bad. If you've gone through, say, tremendous struggle in your relationships in your life, and now you're 45 years old and you've learned so much about relationships, you've had these 8 failed relationships or something, and it's been such a roller coaster ride that you feel inclined to want to help other people avoid the same pitfalls. So you start writing about all those bad relationships. Mm-hmm. And, this person was saying it was bringing them down to write about that because it was putting them back in the vibration of all that pain, right? But that they wanted to do it because they wanted to inspire other people. And Abraham was saying, you're putting yourself in a step one moment when you want to do something like that. Well, I want to listen to what's going on in the world news because I want to help out. So if I know how bad it is with, say, Black Lives Matter, then I want to listen to the really bad stories of how the police are abusing blacks, because then I'll really be motivated to want to help. And okay, well, or I'll be motivated to want to make a documentary so that people can see, look at how bad police are abusing blacks, and now let's do something about this. And so Abraham was saying, those getting into that step one place, you're asking. It's okay to do that because you're launching rockets of desire. That is the first step towards the solution. But if you don't, in the process, get to the place where you see the solution coming in and how it's going to happen, like if your documentary doesn't show the solution, then you're just staying stuck in the asking. And they said there's nothing wrong with that because you're asking, and the universe is going to answer and answer and answer. So the more people have angst about things, they're asking the universe to bring the solution. They're asking stronger and stronger and stronger. But what they say is the person could have an easier ride if they would focus on the solution more, than the problem, and get quicker to the solution rather than staying in the angst. We were talking about that with grief. Somebody's going through grief and grief and grief and grief. At what point do they say, okay, I've grieved for 8 years about the loss of my child, and now I'm going to turn towards, positive expression about the beauty of her life and about how I want other children to have a beautiful life. Or, they turn their grief into abundance. They turn their grief into beauty.
Mm-hmm. It's a good question. So, I mean, the way that you phrase and discuss that, I mean, if I were kind of playing devil's advocate, I would kind of hear Wendy saying, well, what you're saying is fine, and I completely agree with it. I think what I was talking about was perhaps the person who originated the idea that you have to, put down restrictions. You have to put restrictions with the consequences assigned to them in order to achieve desired goals in life. And so sometimes they're just people. I'll use a more brutal example. Sometimes they're just people who need to be killed. I mean, we have to kill people to make this a better world in some cases. And we just should stop being squeamish about it. And frankly, I'll be quite joyous when we do it, because I know deep down inside that when I kill enough people who are, the ones who are getting in the way, my world is going to be better. And I'm not saying that she favors that at all. That's not at all what I'm saying. I'm saying she's hypothesizing there can be somebody like that. There can be people like that.
Oh, there are people like that. I know them.
Well, we've seen them. We know about. I mean, they're often glorified.
Yeah, and they often believe really, really strongly in that belief, and to me it's frightening, of course, and it's scary, and I wish that they would never go there. But I understand that they're that backed up about how could solution ever happen, and they think that's been used throughout the world for forever, right? I mean, if we just get rid of those people, then we won't have the problem.
That's right.
It's like,
that's right.
But in reality, people don't recognize that they're vibrating with that is perpetuating that vibration in the world. And so when they become the perpetrators of that vibration, then they bring alive more of that vibration. They don't do that and then immediately turn away from it. It's like me. I'm a life coach who spent a huge amount of my life, it must have been a huge amount of my childhood, being programmed into the belief that I'm only going to get things done by feeling the fear of not getting it done. In other words, I had such a strong dose of that even though I'm a life coach who's teaching the opposite, I still struggle within my own life to not come from that place of believing that I'm going to get my results by forcing myself to do something, by motivating myself by threatening, creating a threatening situation where, look, Tom, if you don't do that, you're going to run out of money. Or look, if you don't do that, you're going to be embarrassed when you go to your Toastmasters. If you don't have your speech really right, you're going to be embarrassed in front of those people, and you won't show up the way you want. And so you better practice that speech. Forget about sleep, practice the speech until 2 a.m. because, you got to get it right. Now, I'm pretty good in that I really won't practice till 2 a.m. I'll practice till 11 and I'll stop. But it's like I can feel that I'm not always giving that speech because I'm motivated. I mean, because I'm inspired, that I'm doing it because this is fun. Although it's funny because each speech I do at Toastmasters now, I do it from the place of constantly asking myself, is this a fun topic and am I having fun delivering it? Is this a fun topic? Am I having fun delivering it? Because I'm trying to retrain myself in every area of my life. Am I doing this for fun? Am I doing this for fun? Am I doing this because I like this? And if not, I don't really want to get up in front of those people and talk. So even when I stand on that stage in front of those 30 people, I'm really like, first thing I do is check in with myself. Am I feeling good? Am I talking from a place that I'm happy? Am I enjoying this?
Yeah, sure. I'd say it's a critical thing. And I agree with you that the choices for those of us who don't want to be brutal killers or whatever are to choose between, do we follow the model of, well, you have to be motivated and driven in this way in order to produce a better society. Clearly that's not good for that kind of personality. I'm still thinking, though, about the other personality, the one that we both acknowledge exists and is out there in a fairly large size numbers. That personality basically believes in utilizing force in order to achieve objectives and saying it's a good thing to do that, and it's actually a bad thing not to do that.
Yeah,
So I'm asking myself about that in the context of what we brought up earlier, the idea that if everyone were to focus on doing what they really wanted to do, that society as a whole would transform dramatically. And I still believe that. But there's this little piece of doubt in my mind, and the doubt is based on this. If there are people, and we both agree there are, who truly believe that the best thing they can do is to cause harm in certain situations for the greater good, then the one thing they're going to want to do is to cause harm in situations for the greater good. So how do I reconcile in my mind that with the idea that Abraham proposes, which is if everybody or if a large number of people shift their thinking to just doing what they believe feels good to them, that we're going to end up having a shift in society? Because it looks to me that group of people who already believe in using force and so forth, it looks like they're not going to shift their thinking. In fact, they're going to probably play it up and even do what they're doing more so.
Well, it happens a person at a time. And so you have to start somewhere. And the way I look at it is I've made a decision to no longer be a person who pushes against things in order to get the results I want to see in society. And in fact, I've more decided to believe what Abraham and some other channeled entities say, in that nothing is broken here. That's even what Seth said, who we covered a little bit of his stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But, is that nothing is broken in the world. Now, that's a tough one to buy at all if you believe that, that there's other perpetrators who need to be called out, and you need, or that there are problems in the environment that need to be addressed by being aggressively, fighting for the cause. And so then if you say to those people, if you would just follow your bliss and what feels good to you every day, you would do more good for the world than by pushing against these things.
Well, I think that's the real value right there, obviously, because what it really does is say to people who are not force-oriented, live your belief. When you live your belief, that makes the world a better place. And I do agree with that. I think that is universally true. It's true no matter what the number is, a small number, a large number, a medium number, it makes no difference. I'm just not sure I'm totally ready to buy into the idea that the world as a whole changes dramatically as long as there are large numbers of people who are utilizing the contrast in the other way and doing it from their own position of bliss.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I noticed that with my kids' generation, because they're all between ages of 25 and 35, that with their peers, and I guess I'm really fortunate that my kids are so creative, but they are pretty representative of a lot of their friends. And I noticed that tons of kids, and that I guess it's the millennial generation that are like my kids, they follow their bliss as much as they possibly can, whether it comes to what they want to do every day or it comes to the work they're doing. So, my three kids, one's a DJ, one's a professional singer, and one's a professional jeweler. They all are doing stuff that are just wonderful, turning themselves on to such awesome things. Mm-hmm. But then when I look at what a lot of their friends they grew up with are doing, they're also doing amazing things. Friends are, incredible artists. Friends are, I don't know what all it is, but they're a lot of creative people. Excuse me.
There are a lot of creative people, and that's a great thing.
And the younger generation is choosing that a lot more than my generation did. A lot more.
Yeah, I think there is an overall trend, and I think it's even true for our generation, that we're sort of like the late bloomers, right? The baby boomers are the late bloomers, but we are showing signs of wanting to spend more of our time on what we enjoy and less time on what we feel like we have to do. I mean, there's still a very strong tendency in the other direction, but it's less of one. I mean, as I look back generation by generation going backward, each previous generation was followed by a generation that expanded the envelope more. And while I certainly would not have wanted to live in those earlier generations with all the restrictions they had, I could still see the trend. The trend is definitely there.
Yeah.
And it exists today. And the really interesting thing, I think, is looking at what happens when the millennials, is now starting to happen, as they have their own children. What happens to I don't know what the name of the next generation is, but whatever that generation is, they're going to be expanding the envelope even more.
That's right.
That's going to be really interesting.
And that's why Abraham has said so many times is we're not worried about your world at all and where it's headed, because there's so much good new energy coming in, and all of that new energy is coming on the shoulders of the previous generations, and their intention is to follow their default state of bliss. And so, that's why, like, my website's called You Are Joy, because I came to the realization that that's where I want to come from in everything I want to do. I want to come from my default state, and I want to help people come from their default state. One of my biggest passions my entire life, ever since college, has been to follow my bliss. It's been to do the things in my life that really feel good to me, as I was saying earlier. And I find that's, for my generation, it seemed like it's, at least for me, it was a project. It was a project I've spent a good amount of my life trying to convince myself that I can follow my bliss. I've had other friends, of course, who are my age, who followed their bliss early on, and they had wonderful careers. I mean, a person maybe chose to be a doctor or they chose to be a lawyer, but they had a passion for it. They were doing it in a way that they really were turned on by it. And I say anybody who's doing something that feels good to them, I say go for it. It's that good feeling that matters. And that's a feeling that's constantly morphing and changing. It's like what your inner being is telling you to do today is going to be different tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so, it's a malleable thing that's changing constantly. And for us to get into the place where we can flow with that, what feels good to me, what feels good to me, what feels good to me, and give ourselves permission to do that and get out of this belief that I don't have the luxury to ask what feels good to me. I have to do what I have to do. And of course, even I or, anybody can get into that position easily where, like I was saying, I still wrestle with that every day, well, what do I have? I darn well better sell those 3 items in my garage or I'm not going to have a place to put them in my new place because my new place doesn't have the same square footage or whatever is motivating me. It's often around still that feeling that I better do it, and I love to just constantly every day try to dance with that idea and go, wait a minute, I can finesse this. I can find a way to do what feels good. I can turn this into a good feeling even.
I just did a little quick look up just out of curiosity. It turns out the name of the generation after millennials is Generation Z. So we have boomers, Gen X,
what does the
Gen
Z
Y.
stand for, I wonder?
I think it stands for this comes after Y because the millennials is Generation
the last
Y.
Generation.
Yeah, right. I mean, Generation Y and millennials is sort of they're sort of separate. They're sort of the same. So maybe that's what the thinking is because you have boomers, X, Y, and or millennials, and then Z. So I don't know. Maybe A prime comes after that. I don't know.
Oh, maybe.
No
that'll
idea.
be interesting to see.
Yeah.
Well, they say we're at the end of the darkest age and we're just beginning, we're entering now into this age of light where the whole earth is going to transform in ways that we are going to be so blown away that we're not even going to believe what we're seeing and experiencing. I think that's true. And so maybe calling it Generation A, the next Generation A will be the beginning of a whole new paradigm, It's a thing that I understand.
I want to ask you about something.
Yeah,
you said something interesting. You said we're coming to the end of the darkest age, which is not the way I perceive it at all. So I'm curious, what makes you think it's the darkest age?
Well, what we've been going through, I'm basing this a lot on, like watching what's happened, say, with the world wars and the, mass extermination of people, of races, genocide and the, this whole way that we've devastated the environment and this and that, that you could call that the darkest, a very dark time. A lot of people think of it as, we've been in a dark time because of the man's inhumanity to man and man's inhumanity towards animals and towards, living in harmony with the earth and with each other, that we're moving out of a very dark time. And then if you study, like, say, for example, the Upanishads from India, these ancient scriptures, or you study the Mayan calendar and things, there's a lot of mythology that seems to indicate that things go in these great big cycles. That's what the Upanishads teach, and that they call the time that we're coming out of. In India, they speak of the time we're coming out of right now as we're leaving Kali Yuga, the age of darkness, and we're entering Sat Yuga, the age of light.
When did the age of darkness start, according to them?
Several thousand years ago.
So basically, all of European history then is the Dark Ages.
Yes. The whole thing of moving away.
I got to say something about this. This is really an important thing for me to say, and that is they're nuts.
Well, I don't really care.
I'm serious. I really believe that that's crazy thinking, because what they basically did is they set themselves up over a 2,000 year period of saying, well, this is a terrible time to be alive.
Yeah, you could look at it that way.
That's the way it seems to me.
Of course, that's not the way that Abraham would look at it.
No.
I don't look at it that way.
I don't either.
I can understand. For a long time, I saw reality that way because I was so caught up in the evening news, you might say. Like, I believe so much in. I mean, I'm literally in this group called Intenders, which is about coming together with a group of people who are talking about what they're grateful for and what they intend, and it's about being a creator in your life of what you intend to see happen in the world. But so many of those people, after being in that group for 3 years, they still bring to the meeting the reflection of what's on the news. In other words, there's still a really strong belief in that group from a number of people that we are in a very troubled world, and that we really need to take these causes to heart, that we need to keep fighting for the right reasons, for all the good things we want to see happen on the earth, and that it's very tragic the way things are. And I try to express almost every meeting that, well, really that's the opinion that we get when we watch the news. Because the news,
well, not just the news, that's an opinion that goes back to Greek mythology.
Yeah, true.
That opinion's been around for a long time, and it's an opinion that basically advocates that other viewpoint we were talking about, the one that says you have to force change, you have to force improvements. If you don't kill the right people, you're going to not have a better society. If you don't destroy the right things to destroy, you're not going to have a better society.
Or if you don't resist and get out there with your megaphones and your placards and you unite with everybody and you all hold hands and you all march down the street, that the change won't happen. And of course, there's a lot of
and there's really
evidence.
not a difference, in my view. There's really not a difference between those two viewpoints. I mean, there is kind of like a difference, but in terms of their emotional content, there's no difference. The emotional content is identical between those two viewpoints, and that has always fascinated me. The fact that there are, I mean, I saw this a lot, and I know you did too. We lived during that time period during the 60s and 70s. I'm particularly thinking about the Vietnam War. During that time period, there was all this angst. There were the demonstrations. Many of them were violent. There were crackdowns. I mean, Kent State happened on my 13th birthday. That one's ingrained in my mind. I mean, there's a whole bunch of these things that occurred, and there was very little difference between the mindsets that were at odds with each other. On the one hand, you had the hawks who believed we had to be in Vietnam to stop the domino theory and stop those horrible commies, and if we didn't do that, the world was going to come to an end. And on the other hand, you had the people who said we have to join hands together, we have to fight for what we believe in. In some cases, we have to blow things up. In other cases, we just sit down and have demonstrations. And if we don't do that, the world's going to come to an end. It was the same mindset, just two different ways of looking at it.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, I'm still blown away by that.
Yeah, it's still a huge thing in my world. I mean, my ex-wife just sent me a message on Facebook, that, invited me to come to a great big giant demonstration in Denver. And, and I know there's plenty of my friends that'll go to that. And I don't say, don't go. There's nothing wrong with that. And it's exactly a step one thing. They're asking for change. They're asking for change. They're asking for change. They're demanding it, and so they're launching rockets of desire. But is that the way that life ultimately really, I mean, if you don't get to step 3 of allowing in the solution, of allowing, and how do you allow in if you're not in the vibration of inspiration? That's the difference between motivation and inspiration, is getting to this place where you're truly inspired. And that's why I tell my son, he's so torn between being an activist and being an artist. And I tell him, I said, when you make your beautiful jewelry, you're actually bringing so much beauty into the world that inspiration might be more powerful than you being so upset at the Bilderbergs and the people that have the money and the people that have the power who are causing so much angst in the world. Says you might do more to affect change in the world by making beautiful jewelry and bringing all this light and ease and happiness into people's lives.
No, I would say would do more, not just might. I would say would, for sure.
Well, I say might to him because he's so strongly
I understand. Yeah.
In the fight. He's like, if you don't fight, you are part of the problem. That's how he sees it, to the point that I think, he would get violent, if he was given half a chance, like, because he so strongly believes that these other people are screwing up his life. They're screwing up his future, because, by cutting off, by creating a world that is possibly going to die because of pollution, because of global climate change, or by, making a monetary system that is totally oppressive with haves and have-nots. He says, he feels like he's ending up on the short end of the stick.
Yeah.
And really he's not.
No, not at all.
He's got a fantastic life. He makes incredible money doing his jewelry. And he's right now traveling all over the world. So it's like, but I'm trying to get him to the point where he softens. I mean, I would like him to see him get to the point where he softens. I don't really like push for him to change, but I hope that he will, and every time I have dinner with
ultimately,
him,
what he's expressing.
Talk about the positive aspects. What's that?
What he's expressing is basically the same angst that was expressed during the Vietnam War, and has been expressed by any other. The civil rights movement. You name whatever struggle there was. India's struggle for independence. You can look anywhere around the world at any time period where any kind of struggle like that was going on, and it's the same phenomenon over and over again. And that phenomenon is, I feel powerless.
Yeah.
I do not recognize my own power. And I think that's what Abraham is really pointing at when they say that we would have a much better and a much different, much more advanced world if more and more people adopted the views that, the understandings that Abraham has been sharing, because Abraham is all about empowering people personally. Personally, developing your knowledge and your awareness and your use of personal power that we all have access to as creators, because we are all creators. We all have that ability, even though we don't know it. Even though when we first try it, we can't seem to make it happen. We still do have that ability to create reality, to create matter into whatever shape we want to, starting with our minds. And yes, we are in the very earliest infant stages of learning how to do that deliberately in our physical existence. But nevertheless, we're doing it. We're learning it. We're developing it. And that power, now that's where, for me, the Abrahamic message really makes sense. That even if you have people who truly believe that the best thing they can do is to use force in order to achieve change, even those people, when they truly start to understand and use their own power within their own lives, I believe they end up changing their minds about what motivates them, about what excites them, about what their impulses make them want to do. I think they actually leave behind, after a time, the idea of, I want to kill, I want to destroy, I want to force this world to be better, because it no longer serves them when they are empowered personally inside. That's the way I kind of bring the whole thing together. I still have trouble understanding that mentality, but I at least can see how somebody could grow out of it. That's the way I'm looking at it.
Well, you grew out of it. You grew out of your libertarian thing, where you were really a staunch advocate of that. Yeah. And you used to, get on the soapbox about it, right? Or
absolutely, yeah.
You push for it rather than,
push for ironically, I would have argued that I was against force. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a key libertarian concept. The key libertarian concept is we are against people initiating force against other people. We're not interested in that. We're opposed to it. And yet, when you look at the actions don't match the words. It's kind of a funny thing.
And people learn. I mean, if you really like, that's what I love about coaching, is because I can be in conversations with people who, and half of what my coaching is, or maybe more than half, maybe all of it in a way, is really helping people see how to dance with their life and be in their vortex, be in the place of their bliss and their joy and their ease and their allowing, rather than being in this place of pushing and trying and struggling and worrying and making their lives difficult. But someone who's just, for example, is trying to get to an appointment, and they're late. We've all been there, where if we're in the headspace where we're focused on the fear we have about being late and the repercussions that are going to happen. We're going to be embarrassed, or we're going to lose our job, or we're going to disappoint somebody, and so we're trying really hard to get there on time. But what happens when you're in that headspace is you come roaring out of your neighborhood in your car, and the first thing that happens is you hit the red light, and you not only hit it just the wrong time, but it's the longest red light you ever sat at. and then when you get on the freeway and you got your 5-minute drive to the next town where your appointment is, right away you get on the freeway and, oh my God, the traffic's backed up, or there's somebody with the flashers on in their car because one of their tires is messed up and they're going really slow, and all the traffic is trying to get around this person. And, and so then, second you get around them, you're suddenly behind this truck that's going really, really slow. And, if you're in that headspace all the way to your appointment, it's going to be like that. And it's horrible, right?
And we don't notice it. We don't notice the pattern either. That's the thing that it blows my mind, because I didn't notice it for years. It had to be pointed out to me how this pattern worked before I finally recognized that it was there. And yet the evidence was overwhelming. Yeah. The evidence was overwhelming.
That's right.
Unbelievable.
And so now every time I'm going anywhere or doing anything, I'm always cognizant of, am I relaxed? Am I relaxed? Am I enjoying this ride? Am I doing this in a way that I'm giving myself enough time, for one thing? But if I am late, I talk to myself, and I talk myself out of worrying about it. I talk myself out of making it a big deal, and I just go, well, if I'm a little bit late. And it's funny because Abraham said one of the biggest things behind this whole motivation thing is that we're driven a lot by pleasing other people.
Yes.
They said that's one of the, I'm realizing in my life, it's one of the hugest things to let go of, is worrying about what other people think about us. We have to be concerned about what we think about us. They said it's a relationship between you and you that matters. And it's whether you are pleasing yourself. Are you happy? Are you feeling good? Are you creating a life that you enjoy? And whether, so much of what we've done in the past has come from that parental upbringing and that school upbringing that says you've got to please the teacher, you've got to please your parents, you've got to please your friends, you've got to make other people happy. You've got to show up to not get embarrassed, to not put yourself in a position where you're, standing out in the society, and therefore you're not, your label is not good enough, or not pretty enough, or not something enough. So we dress for that reason. We act for that reason. Am I pleasing people? And God, it's like, you can't live for that. We have to live for, am I really happy doing this? Does this feel right to me?
It's a big shift to make. It's a powerful shift, but it's a big shift to make for all the reasons you just described, because we have so much training and so much strong belief system, so much cultural belief in the opposite. Yeah. What Abraham teaches us, this whole idea of connecting you with you, how many of us listen to that? And I'm talking about people who are followers of Abraham, or people who are into and knowledgeable about the law of attraction. How many of us actually take the time to explore that relationship between you and you personally within ourselves? We'll think about it. We'll say, yeah, okay, I can kind of see that. We'll look at it abstractly. We'll analyze it. But how many of us actually take the time to explore it? Mm-hmm. I'm willing to bet that it's a minority.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is.
Yeah, and yet it's the most vital thing we can do. I'm just learning that through the mirror work. I have been now exploring the law of attraction since November 2008. That's when I first watched The Secret. Mm-hmm. And we're now in March 2018, so basically 9.5 years ago. And in those 9.5 years, it's in the last couple months that I'm finally starting. Not even that. I've been doing the mirror work for 34 days. So in the last month plus, that I'm finally starting to work on the relationship between me and me.
Wow.
Now, I have been working on it indirectly in a lot of ways. I've been trying to improve my positive outlook and overcome negativity by pivoting and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of examining me and me, that's new. I haven't been doing that up until a month or two, three ago, something like that.
Yeah.
Wow, what took me so long?
Well, you're right on time. You're exactly where you're
I
supposed to
guess,
be.
yeah, I guess that's what it is.
Oh yeah, it took you. It takes what it
It
takes,
takes
and
what it
it's all
takes, yes.
and it's all good. That's why there's no regret in our lives. If we just say, hey, I've always been in the right place on my path, and I'm still in the right place because somehow from my infinite being, I'm orchestrating this anyway. And I'm doing the thing that I came here to do, and it's a big play. It's a great big game, but it doesn't always feel like that. It feels really serious. And but it really
That's
is
a good point. It feels really serious. That's a great point. That goes right to the point of the topic today. Because if we spent more time not treating it as serious and treating it as fun, I wonder how much faster we would get to the places we want to be, attract the abundance we want, attract the health we want, attract the relationships we want. I wonder how much better and how much faster we would be at doing that if we were to be in the space of, I do it because I want to do it.
Yeah. And because it's fun. That's why that's why we did a whole podcast on Is It Fun? That was the name of the podcast. And because, Abraham said you can get your vortex will pull you into the wonderful life that you want to live when you get close enough to the vibration of all these wonderful things you have in your vortex. So, all of us want these really good feeling lives, so because we want them, we've asked the universe to provide that in a very indirect way. We don't always realize that every time we know what we don't want, we're asking for what we do want. So we're motivating ourselves by what we don't want, but we're really asking for what we do want. Mm-hmm. And so then we're putting all this stuff in our vortex. But they said the whole trick is just to get close enough to that vibration. And they said all it takes is a belief and hope, just some desire, belief and hope. The vortex will pull us in, and there'll be like a crack in the part of us that always thinks we have to make effort, struggle to get our results. And there'll be a crack that'll let us into feeling good. It'll be like this path of least resistance, because a human being is just going through too many changes every day to not have times where they see that when they relax, they get good results. They see that when they feel, for example, if you eat your meal feeling relaxed, you digest your food really well. If you eat your meal feeling uptight and worried, you start noticing that you get gas and you burping and you're like feeling like, it's not fun.
It's true. It's true. Hey, I got a question for you. So there's all
these little ways. Yeah.
I got a question for you. I've been paying a lot more attention to how I feel when I'm doing stuff. And lately, of course, I've been working on editing the book, which, by the way, is now 85% edited. So I'm making good progress.
Way to go.
Yeah, I'm making progress, which is great. And mostly it's a very enjoyable experience because the stories, so many of them are so uplifting and so forth. But I can't say all of it is enjoyable. There are times when I'm reading stuff that, part of the setup of the story is so painful, the stuff that they went through, and I'm having to relive it because I'm reading it and making changes and so forth. So I'm staying focused. Well, we both know when you keep focusing on and thinking about something that's negative over and over again, you just build it until it gets bigger and bigger. That's the essence of using the law of attraction as a creator. And so I have to take breaks and get away from it and so forth. Well, that's just one example. Lots of people have lots of similar examples in their regular lives, particularly with like work lives or school lives or whatever, where they're doing stuff and part of the stuff is just unpleasant to them. It's just not fun. So this is like the age-old question. How do I follow my bliss? How do I do what I enjoy when part of what I enjoy is doing stuff I really don't enjoy at all? Now, Abraham says, well, you try to pivot it, right? You try to do pivot points and you try to find what's the good part and so forth. Yeah. And that's great teaching. It's certainly something that I find is something I can do between dealing with those things. Like I deal with a negative thing, and then I take a break, and during the break I can do the pivot. Doing the pivot while you're doing it, though, that I have not been able to crack that one. And I'm curious to know, do you have any insights on how do you crack when you're dealing with it directly, when you're directly interacting with that thing, that negative thing that you don't like, how do you pivot in the middle of that interaction?
Yeah, what I do and what Abraham suggests is that you look at things about it that you can lighten up those things, that you can soothe yourself about. So let's say, I don't want to clean out the garage, but I have to clean out the garage. So I go out there and I look at all that stuff, and first thing I think is, oh my God, there's so much stuff, and I'm so tired of trying to deal with this stuff because I can't get rid of it, but I don't want it anymore, but I can't get rid of it because I still think I need it. Well, then, I start talking to myself about, well, let me do, I guess I can do one thing at a time. What's something in this garage that I could do that feels somewhat good, like to deal with? Oh, well, okay, I'm going to sell that cargo box, that rocket box that goes on top of my car. So why don't I get it and just start to clean it up, and I'll take some pictures of it, and I'll, so I'll do that, and that feels okay. That felt okay. And that, well, what's something else that sort of feels okay? And I do that, and I get a few things into my car, or I sell a few things on Craigslist, and oh, well, the garage is not so crowded now, and so it becomes this process of, every time I face the situation, is there something about it that I can make lighter, that I can soothe myself? It's soothing ourselves is the main thing, and that's the main thing I do with clients. It's like, can I help soothe them and uplift them a little bit? Like Abraham uses the, the thing like the focus wheel. You can't get on the focus wheel unless you find something that feels somewhat good to you.
Take a second to explain what the focus wheel is, because that's not a topic we talk about a lot.
Okay, yeah, that's a big thing to explain, but it's just basically a way of you make a circle on a piece of paper, and you make all the marks of the clock on the circle. 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. You make a mark at each of those points, and then you put something in the center that you're having a problem with. Like I could put in the center, I need to clean out the garage, or no, I want a clean garage. And then at the top, I put something that makes me feel like this can be okay. It says, well, I know I'll feel better when it's cleaned out. Okay, I put that at 12 o'clock. And at 1 o'clock, I put something like this. Maybe if I do this one thing at a time, I can actually enjoy it. And at 2 o'clock, I put when I did get rid of that rocket box, it did feel a lot better to have sold that and gotten it out of the garage. It was such a big thing. And at 2 o'clock, I put something similar, like when I got rid of the bike rack, I actually got $50 for that. That felt good, So you put things on this focus wheel that help you slowly feel better about accomplishing the thing that seemed like such a big deal, such an onerous, difficult project, or whatever it is that felt so difficult, difficult in a relationship. And then you say, what's some little thing I can do that gets me in a momentum of feeling better about it. And then you add another better feeling thing. And pretty soon you develop an actual momentum. And you realizing that you're getting it done and you're feeling pretty good about it. So that's what you do. That's one way you approach the whole thing.
And I think part of it too is recognizing that sometimes when you're doing stuff that's unpleasant, you always want to get yourself into that positive frame of mind before you try to go at it, and you want to find that silver lining before you go at it. But the other part is recognizing you don't have to keep plowing through until it's painful. You can actually just plow through until you reach a certain point that's not comfortable, and then stop and take a break.
Exactly.
And then get yourself back into a positive frame of mind, and then go at it again. Because that way it becomes easier to get the job done. I just have never found anything better than that in terms of I'm in the middle of the really rough stuff, other than just disengaging for a while. Because when you're in the middle of it,
that's a great thing to do, and go get aligned again. They say take a nap.
Yeah,
take a nap. Go sit and meditate for 5 minutes. Go
take
for a walk.
Take a run. Anything. Yeah, just something to break
that up. Put on your
up.
headset and listen to your favorite music.
Exactly. Yeah, it's all good stuff. So, Tom, we're at the end of our time as usual. Just as things really get going. But it's been great. Tell us how can people reach you if they need to reach out for personal assistance.
They can go to my website, which is youarejoy.com, youarejoy.com, and they can sign up on there. There's a page for a free coaching session with me, which they can sign up on the website for. And then from there, they can decide if they want more coaching with me.
All right, great. Well, have a great weekend, Tom. We'll talk again on Monday.
Thank you, Walt. Take care.
All right, we'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.